Caitlyn Clark happens to be the new woman, right? And she happens to be white. And, Sean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen, they out there knocking her ass around.
While Caitlyn is fantastic and I think she's going to have an incredible career in the WNBA, there are women that were worthy of coverage prior to her arriving, and I just will not be silenced when it comes to that.
Caitlyn Clark is becoming the best player in the entire WNBA, not because she's white, because she's that good.
I could actually argue that it hurts the game more if they had given her a roster spot over someone more deserving.
So go ahead and argue.
That's exactly what I'm saying, because I think it makes a mockery of the women's game. If the focus on, now we just have to have people because of marketing and their intention, and they're not as talented, and we're not putting the best team out there.
Go ahead and look. Everywhere you turn, Indiana Fever is breaking records. All Cheryl Swoops did was validate all the speculation that there's folks hating on Caitlyn Clark.
Ever since she burst into the national spotlight like a freight train through a tunnel, Caitlyn Clark is one of the constant topics for sports talk show hosts and basketball experts. Dropping her name into a conversation practically guarantees better viewership numbers, so professional commentators are not letting this golden opportunity slip. The range of their opinions about Caitlyn Clark is very broad, and it has evolved along with Caitlyn's improved play. As opposed to players and coaches, TV personalities more often focus on the wider implication of Caitlyn's presence in the WNBA and not only her basketball performance. Since that leaves even more room for interpretation, there are unavoidably some controversial quotes given by big-name sports journalists that caused a lot of online disagreements. One thing that separates top basketball analysts from regular reporters is their willingness to give a personal interpretation of objective events and take some risk for the outcome. There can be no disagreement about Caitlyn Clark's scoring numbers or the Indiana Fever record, but when it comes to predicting the rest of Clark's career and explaining her relevance for women's basketball, everyone can speculate as much as they like. The best NBA and WNBA analysts have spent decades watching basketball and evaluating players, so they at least have some background against which to base their judgments. Now, some experts may have a hidden agenda they are trying to advance when they are talking about Caitlyn Clark, so their words need to be analyzed within a broader context. For example, if the analyst in question is known for causing controversy with his statements, his comments about Clark could be merely a way to get reactions. Conversely, NBA pundits who usually have balanced opinions carry more weight in a discussion of this kind. We will start with media voices that have a lot of credibility and a license to speak freely. Michael Wilbon is a veteran NBA analyst who is widely respected in the industry and has the green light from his bosses to talk about any subject he finds interesting. He has been active in the sports media since the late 70s, and he held jobs at some of the most respected media organizations in the past. Wilbon has a very direct style of communication and is never afraid to touch on explosive topics, so his take on Caitlyn Clark and her image in the media is kind of harsh, but also very accurate and enlightening.
You're not going to find that white American star in men's basketball. Caitlyn Clark is that. And she brings people into the tent because she's great and she's unique. In this case, she's white in a sport of black people. That's part of the deal. Part of the deal.
No
a big
argument
part.
on any of that.
Elephant in the room.
This is a well-known story that goes back a long time, even to the days of Larry Bird. All of the last 3 NBA MVPs who were white were born and raised outside of the United States. Steve Nash from Canada, Dirk Nowitzki from Germany, and of course the reigning MVP, the Joker, from Serbia. There are no American-born white superstars in male competition right now, although current Duke freshman Cooper Flagg could change that soon. This explains the appeal that Caitlyn Clark has for regular Americans, who just want a hero to call their own. Wilbon fairly mentions that Caitlyn is a great player, but he also highlights her unique role in the sport and the racial dimension of the discussion around her. It's telling that another well-respected NBA analyst agrees with Wilbon when it comes to Caitlyn's cultural significance and impact on the audiences. Mike Greenberg is white, so he views things from the other side of the field, but he is also quick to point out that Caitlyn Clark is valuable to the U.S. national team, and as extension, the American fans. He gave a very detailed explanation of his argument for prioritizing long-term interests of the league.
The people who are watching the Olympics are a lot of people who might be very interested in Caitlyn Clark and might not be that interested in basketball. And so if you have Caitlyn Clark on that team and all of a sudden they're watching, they might all of a sudden become big fans of Breanna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu and the other best players in the league right now, of which she, candidly, at this particular moment, is not. So that would be the argument for putting her on the team. And it's a perfectly valid one.
While Greenberg's comments were directly related to Caitlyn's absence from the U.S. Olympic team, his words can be extrapolated to describe her WNBA experience as well. She has the difficult duty to act as an ambassador of the game, while also competing to win basketball games at the highest level. In some cases, her high profile may be working against her, and it's entirely possible that the U.S. team coaches decided they want to focus on winning the gold, rather than growing the game's popularity. Caitlyn's media portrayal as the savior of the WNBA has done her no favors among her peers either. Many WNBA players welcomed her to the league with mean smirks and hard fouls. More alarmingly, some established NBA commentators tend to downplay the relevance of such behavior and explain it away as perfectly normal. Bomani Jones openly accepts that all the Caitlyn hate early in the season was in part racially motivated, but he fails to draw the line that separates fair competition from schoolyard bullying. Here is what he said about the black versus white aspect of the Caitlyn Clark discussion.
When I say that the black girls are being mean to her, I'm saying that just because, relative to college basketball at least, this league seems to be a whole lot blacker than women's college basketball. It just happen to be a lot of black women playing in this league. And Caitlyn Clark happens to be the new girl and a new woman, right? I can be bad about that. I'm gonna do my best. Caitlyn Clark happens to be the new woman, right? And she happens to be white.
If this is the best he can do, Bomani should try harder. Despite belonging to a minority population, he seems to think that a majority can do anything with impunity within the microcosm of the WNBA. That's just plain wrong, and Caitlyn Clark should be treated with dignity regardless of her skin color. To put it another way, if the best white basketball player on the planet is treated like this, what can light-skinned girls who are fighting for the last roster spots expect? Black players in the WNBA know better and should do better if they want to be seen as promoters of equality and tolerance, to which many of them openly aspire. Not that Caitlyn Clark minds all that much. Despite being exposed to non-stop media scrutiny and physical defenses in every game, Indiana star guard just keeps getting better. If you ask one of the most popular sports journalists in America, she might be shining right now precisely because of all the animosity. Bill Simmons is beloved for his candid basketball analysis and brilliant wordsmith skills, and he hasn't exactly been silent on the Caitlyn Clark front. He clearly thinks that Caitlyn almost enjoys being called out by everyone and finds another gear in response.
That Caitlyn game last night was, and I didn't get to watch it because I was doing an event, so I had to come back and zoom through it.
Oh.
The revenge factor of it. There's definitely, she has that quality that a lot of the great athletes have, where there's a grudge factor.
While Caitlyn doesn't look like she is holding a grudge from the outside, we don't know what she is thinking when she is playing a WNBA game. Simmons understands basketball players very well and has seen many of the greatest ones up close over the decades of his rabid NBA fandom, so we need to take his evaluation of Clark very seriously. If he is right about her having that killer instinct and finding extra strength in slights she was exposed to, that could bode well for her basketball career. Players of that kind tend to be immune to adversity and to shine the brightest when the odds are stacked against them. This season seems to support this view, as Clark played her best ball after being left at home while the rest of WNBA stars showcased their game in the Olympics. Her refocused efforts guided Indiana Fever into the playoffs, where anything could happen with such a transcendent player. Fever advancing deep into the playoffs is no longer some fringe theory pushed by crazy Caitlyn fans. This is now a realistic possibility, and top TV talking heads are taking it as such. Famed analyst Rebecca Lobo is a big believer in the abilities of the young Fever squad, but she is aware that the playoffs will represent a learning experience for Clark, as well as her teammates. Her analysis is nuanced and highlights an area of concern that Fever coaches will need to address.
I think they can win a first-round matchup depending on who they play. Right now, they're seeded to play the Connecticut Sun, and this is a team, and the last time that these two teams matched up, Indiana did win that game. But the big concern for Indiana, of course, and you heard Caitlyn Clark and Aaliyah Boston joking about it on the podium, is they don't have any playoff experience. Today, their starting lineup has a combined 0 games of playoff experience. Their entire roster has only 9 games of playoff experience. So that's the question.
You can't argue with the numbers Lobo is citing. although it's fair to mention that Clark has appeared in big games before in the NCAA tournament. On the other hand, young teams can sometimes defy expectations and remain steady under pressure, just enough to win a critical game or two. Like Lobo says, it is entirely within the realm of possibility for Indiana to emerge victorious from the first-round matchup, if they can overcome the jitters and stay on their game. However, this is also a reminder that a team led by a rookie will have a hard time going all the way to the finals and winning. That's why Caitlyn's hardcore fans should be cautious with their championship dreams. One of the biggest talking points against Caitlyn Clark during the first couple of months of the WNBA season was that her ball-dominant style doesn't produce wins. With improved chemistry with her running mates, reduced turnovers, and better overall shooting, Clark has turned that characterization on its head and made the critics look silly. Her recent hot streak of amazing performances has coincided with the Fever's run up the standings, and the most influential NBA analysts like Rachel Nichols are recognizing that. Here is how the famous NBA reporter summed up the balance between Caitlyn's individual brilliance and her leadership of the team.
To me, Caitlyn Clark is the Rookie of the Year right now. She has impacted winning in a bigger way than anyone else in this rookie class. She leads all rookies in 4 or 5 of the stat categories, and her team is on pace to finish a lot better this year than it did last year, meaning she has impacted the overall state of the team.
Did you notice the finality of Rachel's description? She is completely convinced that Caitlyn Clark is the top player in this class, both individually and as someone who causes the team to perform better. The stats alone weren't enough to position her as the top player, but as Caitlyn finds new ways to lead her team to victories against good opponents, the last pockets of resistance against her in the media will likely disintegrate. Basketball is a team sport, and one of Caitlyn's best traits is that she plays it the right way and cares about winning. And those pockets of resistance still exist, believe it or not. Some TV personalities continue to support anti-Clark narratives, or at least look to deflect some of the credit for WNBA growth away from the woman who made it all happen. Many fans consider ESPN anchor Monica McNutt to be one of the most ardent Caitlyn haters, and she is always finding new ways to remind everyone of this fact. Here is a detailed explanation what she sees as wrong in the Caitlyn Clark coverage.
I needed you to be here as this league has seen its best viewership year to year. Now, yes, it has absolutely been taken over the top this year, but this has been a snowballing effect to get to this moment. And so while Caitlyn is fantastic and I think she's going to have an incredible career in the WNBA, there are women that were worthy of coverage prior to her arriving, and I just will not be silenced when it comes to that.
Technically speaking, all of this is true. Still, without Caitlyn, the current explosion of interest almost certainly wouldn't happen for another decade or more, and all the hard work of the older players may have not been rewarded during their careers. McNutt is ignoring the fact that Clark is doing historical things in only her first year, and while her desire to shine a light to other players is commendable, the tone betrays some bitterness towards Clark. Also, the argument that Clark is standing on the shoulders of the giants is a bit hollow, since already as a rookie she is beating most of these women who supposedly deserve credit for the league's rise. Since this argument has been frequently cited in the media, it has taken hold in some quarters. Not everyone agrees, and there are high-profile NBA analysts who support Clark and want to quash any chatter about her being a product of an ongoing process. Former NFL champion and active sports podcaster Shannon Sharpe provided perhaps the most elegant rebuke of McNutt's point of view. Sharpe pointed out the double standard applied to Caitlyn Clark compared to other basketball prodigies, and reminded us of another example of a basketball player with a huge media footprint.
We understand that Caitlyn Clark is good, but what about the women that laid the foundation? When Michael Jordan, wasn't nobody talking about Connie Hawkins? Nobody was talking about Wilt Chamberlain. Nobody was doing that. That's what we've always done. We talked about the player that's currently playing.
Now, comparing Clark to Jordan sounds like a hyperbole, but that's not the main point Sharpe is trying to make here. Extraordinary players should be appreciated in their own right, and that doesn't diminish the contributions of those that came before. Cheering for Caitlyn to become the best version of herself shouldn't be an affront to other players in the league. Too many people are acting like it is, and their motivations may not always be completely transparent. That's why we all need Shannon Sharpe to push back on these questionable views. If there is one voice that is defending Caitlyn Clark in the media louder than Shannon Sharpe, it's definitely Stephen A. Smith. The wildly popular NBA expert is frequently mentioning Clark in his meandering monologues, and it's always been in a positive context, although with some reality checks. He is recently very high on Caitlyn and isn't shy about saying so to anyone who will listen. Here is a terrific soundbite coming from a master of sports commentary and online debate.
Some have compared Caitlyn Clark to Tiger Woods and how she's revolutionized fan engagement in women's basketball. Overall attendance, in case you missed it, is up by 20%, breaking TV viewership ratings and merchandise sales. Either way you slice it, it's clear that we're witnessing a golden era in the sport. Caitlyn Clark, what'd I tell y'all?
You can forgive Stephen A. for being so triumphant and rubbing in his early predictions that Caitlyn will do just fine in the WNBA. He is arguing based on facts about the WNBA business books, which have obviously seen a big boost after Clark joined the league. Rather than just talking about the golden girl, Smith is declaring a golden era that will be remembered for a long time. There are plenty of reasons to believe this may indeed be the case, especially with all the incredible things that young players in the league are doing right now. At this point, Caitlyn Clark is playing so well that she is leaving very little room for debate. Even those basketball reporters who don't totally buy into the notion that she is bullied on the court are clearly impressed by her accomplishments. Nick Wright is a well-known basketball expert who doesn't mind a bit of a debate, but he can't ignore the obvious. In this segment, he laid down some arguments that will enrage the pro-Clark camp, but also made some remarks that pay ultimate respect to Caitlyn.
Both of these things are true. The WNBA is a physical league, and Caitlyn Clark is not, the amount of fouling or hazing or whatever she's dealing with is not outside of the bounds of all of WNBA history. There's just more eyes on it. Another thing that's true is this: she's been excellent. And people that are trying to act like she is a media creation, here is the full list of players in the top 25 this year in points, rebounds, and assists. It is 6 established stars in Caitlyn Clark.
The idea that the amount of attention that is currently directed to everything Caitlyn does is affecting our perception of unfair treatment is very interesting. At the same time, Wright distances himself from the crowd eager to describe Clark purely as a media phenomenon. The numbers put Clark into the elite category even in her first season, and there is nothing else left for the media opinion makers to do but to bestow praise upon her. The only question is, how much praise is too much? How high is Caitlyn's ceiling, and are we justified comparing her with all-time greats this early? We seem to be moving closer to a consensus that Caitlyn Clark is worth all the hype. She is increasingly getting glowing reviews from some of the toughest and most experienced NBA and WNBA experts, earning the admiration of Skip Bayless, who is often grumpy and notoriously hard to impress, speaks volumes about how far Caitlyn Clark has come. In his analysis, Bayless seems to be amazed by what he is seeing from Clark.
Caitlyn Clark is running away with the WNBA assists lead. She's 25 better than anybody else in the league. Pretty extraordinary for a rookie. Caitlyn Clark, in a shock to me, has proven already to be a once-a-generation passer. I did not see that coming at Iowa. I thought scoring, yeah, she's the all-time greatest scorer in the history of college basketball, men's or women's, but passing like this? I'm talking about gifted, LeBron-esque bounce passing.
This is not the only instance of a knowledgeable expert singling out passing as the skill that really sets Caitlyn Clark apart from anyone else. She may not have the same height advantage that LeBron has, but she has that same court vision combined with the ability to predict how the defense will react to her dribbles and moves. Skip sounded genuinely surprised with the level of Caitlyn's passing, which sealed the deal for him when it came to accepting her as a primetime talent. His observation also shows why Caitlyn's game has been so devastating at the pro level. Since she always has the threat of the pass, scoring is much easier as the defense must account for all possibilities. A majority of NBA analysts are delighted by Caitlyn Clark, and even those among them that don't necessarily like her have no choice but to congratulate her on everything she has done this year. At this stage, she is slowly becoming a known quantity, and the growing agreement among people who talk about basketball for a living is a sure sign of her inevitable superstardom. All the controversies of this season might become just footnotes of Caitlyn's legend, and we could all soon take for granted that Caitlyn Clark is the biggest talent in women's basketball in her generation. It will be very interesting to see how her media image evolves as she navigates her first playoff appearance, and if the same reporters who are on her side today keep their faith if her postseason performance is less than perfect.